And would first of all, I would like to recognize and thank Mayor Valenzuela, who is with us today. We do have the mayor of South Tucson. I want to make sure we thank her for being with us. Again, this is all backwards, right? We're the staff and the mayor sit up here. So now we know what this is feeling like. So thank you for being with us today. With that, if you've all had a chance to review the minutes of the July 2nd meeting, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I move to approve.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of July 2nd, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Mr. Ortega, I think we'll spend some time first talking about the current plan and where we are with RTA.
I know you like the microphone in front of you, but I'm going to borrow it from you. So good morning and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. This is my 13th day, so I figured we'd hit the ground running again. Wanted to give you a few updates on a variety of things we've been working on and hopefully put some of them to bed and we don't have to worry about them anymore. At least you'll have the information, the data. So first and foremost, there was conversation about remnant parcels. And so I want to put that to bed. I've had the staff look at it. Lance Peterson's here and can answer questions if needed. Basically, what we've done is we've established that the average price along some of the corridors is about $13.61. That equates to about $8.9 million, assuming that we get the exact amount and there's no additional costs associated with that. So we're probably looking at a max of about 8.9 million. Now that does not include about 5.9 million that is part of a Rio Nuevo RTA City of Tucson agreement. That 5.9 million will go to offset costs that were incurred by the City of Tucson for Broadway. So I don't count that. That's kind of a wash, if you will. So I'm not really focused on that because I think as time goes on, we'll get reimbursed for that as the RTA. So I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that. Now, one of the pieces that's still yet to be accomplished is how do we get those sold? And so we'll be working with the City of Tucson to, the majority of them are in the City of Tucson. We'll be working with them closely to help and facilitate that so we can get those off the books and get them into the coffers. Are there any questions on that? I know that's been a question I know for the board and probably some of you. I wanted to make sure that we had that information for you. Is there any question on that?
How much was the amount again?
It's about 8.9 million. It's do you want the exact amount? It's 8.973202 and 12 cents.
12 cents?
About 12 cents, just in case. It's about 8.9 million. It's about 8.9. I guess, again, that's probably on the high end, depending on what the market will bear when those parcels are put forth. And as we combine parcels, I know the city's been great at doing that. They've been combining parcels and doing things. That might change a little bit, but I suspect it's going to be well below $10 million. So that's just the value of that.
Madam Chair, Mike, that does not include future projects where we anticipate more right-of-way acquisition to occur, right? That is just what is available to sell today.
Madam Chair, yes. So yeah, that's important. These are parcels that we currently have on the books, if you will. This does not include future projects and future acquisitions in that. Those are on a track for those projects, but there seemed to be this question about the existing remnant parcels. So I wanted to, resolve that and put that to bed, if you will.
Is the 5 million that you mentioned within that 8.9 or is that separate?
Madam Chair, no, that's separate. And so just a little sidebar on that. The City of Tucson, Rio Nuevo, and the RTA negotiated an agreement whereby the parcels that were acquired using RTA money basically would go to the Rio Nuevo district for development along Broadway. The proceeds of those sales would then go back to the RTA. Okay. And the expectation is that's probably about $5.9 million. However, there's cost that's been incurred that has not been reimbursed by the city of Tucson. And so the expectation is that we will reimburse, the RTA will reimburse the city of Tucson, those $5.9 million, and then we'll get our money back from Rio Nuevo at some point in the future. So that's why I consider it to be a wash. I don't consider it to be, you know, an IOU on the books. Okay.
Questions from Mike? Good, thank you, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Next, thank you, Lance, appreciate it. Next item, wanted to at least give you an update. I know that the staff, Rick in particular, has been meeting with city and county staff. The intent there is to identify whatever, I use the term roadblocks, pun intended there, so that we can identify what issues need to be resolved in RTA 1 in the delivery of projects. And so my direction to Rick has been, and to the staff generally, is go negotiate, go have conversation with folks that are really trying to deliver projects or things that are outstanding. I know there's questions about reimbursements on Houghton Road, Tangerine, and others, and I want to just resolve those. Whatever the answers are, we just need to make sure that those conversations are happening. If they're not able to reach a resolution at the staff level, they'll escalate that to the directors and the managers. And then if we can't reach resolution at that level, we'll bring it to the board. But one way or another, we just need to resolve whatever those outstanding issues are, mostly because they're IOUs on the budgets. And I want to make sure that we have clarity on how much money we have available for completion of the program, delivery of the program. So I just wanted to give you a quick update. I understand there was a meeting yesterday. It was fruitful, and I'm hopeful that those will continue. So giving you a heads up, Tim, Christine, and Sam, and obviously Jan and Carmine. Okay. Next topic, we had presented to you last meeting a spreadsheet of completion of the corridors. And it looked like this. I think you can put it up now. Is this one? Completion. We'll see it here shortly. I will give you a hard copy as well. This was let's take that, let's take it. This was our way of bringing some specificity, but also clarity on what the projects look like in terms of corridors and the percent complete. And I think it shows a pretty good picture of the progress RTA has made, we as a region have made on that first program, that RTA that we'll call it the 2006.
A different one.
Yep, that's coming. So I'm going to get to that. At the last meeting, Sam, we'll blame you, Sam, had requested that we break it down a little further, and that show the component parts of the corridors and what percent complete they are. And so we've done that as well, which is what's up on the screen there. And as you're looking at this, I think it's important because we had heard comments about there's 17 projects that have yet to be completed. There's 21 projects yet to be completed, which is all fine and accurate, except that it doesn't really paint the picture of the progress we've made to the 06 program, to the RTA 1 program. So this last handout and what's up on the screen is actually a little further breakdown of the corridors. And I think Sam was the one that had requested to really look at the component parts so you could really see it. So those feed into that first page I gave you, which is kind of the overall summary of that. And I do think this is a pretty good picture of not only our progress, but also our status and where we are with the various projects within the court or within the program. Are there any questions on that? Oh, I didn't think to do that. I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm not used to having the mayor behind us. Sorry. So we'll make sure we get some copies. Thank you for covering me on that. Okay. All right. Next, let's talk through our financials. I think it's an opportunity to really go through our financials. And this looks very similar to, now we're on this one. This looks very similar to what I showed you last week. With a couple of additions. Jeff from Oro Valley had suggested, hey, let's add the regional monies as well. So we scrubbed that and really looked at that. James Tow's here and he's available to answer questions. A few things that are important here. We have been talking about a $143 million shortfall. That number's come way down. That's now at 139 million. So that's a little bit of a joke. Okay. Let's not get too excited. Let's not get too, but hey, every million counts, right? But what it does is it gives you a snapshot. And I think it's a very telling picture of the revenues compared to the actuals, so when you look at the columns for what was projected back in probably 05, it's pretty staggering in terms of the shortfall. Okay. But the region did what it had to come up with the dollars associated with getting that $2.1 billion budget. And so you can see the various columns and what they mean. But ultimately, the bottom line is, what does this look like in terms of the shortfall for completion of the program? Now, keep in mind, and James, you can correct me, or Rick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that $139 million shortfall does not include the 4 projects that were included in RTA Next. Is that correct, Rick?
The 4 that we flipped.
Yep. That's very important to remember.
And what's
So
those costs?
those costs are, I believe they're excess about 240 million.
250 total cost.
250.
That in the redefined scope.
Okay, so that's real important. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this because I think there's nuances here, but they're extremely important. So the $139 million shortfall that we have does not include the 4 projects that we've placed in RTA Next. Okay. If we revise the scopes on those to what the jurisdictions want, Silver Bell, Houghton, 22nd, variety of those projects, right? Those costs are about 250 million. If we don't revise the scope, right, those project costs are going to be in the vicinity of 300 million. Is that right? 350 to 360 million. So keep in mind the revision to those scopes is about $100 million decrease in cost. Okay. Now, one of the things that has been gnawing at me is we talk about deferring those projects. And that was the terminology that we had used, which is let's put those projects in RTA Next. My nervousness with saying we are deferring them is that it implies delaying them. Okay. When you really think about what we're doing by putting them in RTA Next, we're accelerating them. Because in order to finish RTA 1, and we'll get to that in a minute, it'll take us 15 years from the end of the program to complete RTA 1 without RTA Next. So if you just very simplistically think about the math on that, we've got a shortfall. And as we put forth regional money, it will take us about 15 years to complete that original, we'll call it RTA 1 program. By putting those 4 projects and potentially others in RTA Next, in essence, what we're doing is we're accelerating them. We're letting the voter know, hey, we're going to recommend a scope change, and we're going to recommend that we put it in RTA Next so that we can accelerate those and get those out the door sooner than we would otherwise. Questions?
Paul, thank you. And Tim has fallen off. I can't see if he's got his hand
Yes, so, Madam Chair, like the past financials that we've seen shows the four rollover projects in RTA Next as being just the additional scope. So is the original cost of those projects still in RTA one?
That's a great question. I'll need help with that, either James or Rick.
No, those go.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, no, those are not included. The deferred projects are completely removed from that calculation in RTA one.
So the 250 million that's shown in RTA Next is the completion of those four rollover projects, original scope plus whatever the additional is?
I can jump in. So the 250 we've been carrying in RTA Next allocated is the redefined right size projects from the jurisdictions. So that's an updated estimate with an updated scope. So that's what they wanted to do and say, if we're going to properly reconfigure this, that's what we want it to look like. If we take no deferral or no voter action on that, then it's back to the original, which is the 350, 360 million that Mike referenced.
But there are no dollars in the current RTA at this point for those four projects.
No, we've gone through, evaluated the timing and looked at the continued use of regional funds and identified about 10 extra years that would be needed, taking us out to about 2040 for a delivery timeframe to complete as per original plan, original scope.
Madam Chair, Rick, the question more specifically though are the four projects included at all in the calculations for this?
And Madam Chair, the north portion of first ballot 13, those dollars, about $12 million are programmed in the current tip.
But other than that, short of that, James, the rest of that is all in RTA has been included as a part of RTA Next with the revised or modified scope. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a little fuzzy for us.
That's the plan, is to unfuzzy this.
Mr. Marketega. Madam Chair, welcome, Mr. Marketega. Okay, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Veronica Moreno. I'm the city manager with the city of South Tucson, and I'm walking into this, I'm learning, I'm listening, but something that I want to make sure that's entered to the record is hearing that we're discussing the original RTA plan. And what I'm hearing now with our new leadership at the city of South Tucson, it was the will of the former mayor to adopt the RTA Next plan with changes. But the will of the current council with the new leadership is to go back to the original plan. So I just want to make sure that there was approximately $23 million that was taken out of the city of South Tucson, and we want to make sure that that's put back into the city of South Tucson. Since we're talking numbers, I wasn't sure if this would be the appropriate time to bring this up since we're still in discussion.
Anyone advocating for funding for their district?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Veronica, thank you for that.
Of course, thank you.
So one of the things that we'll talk about here in a bit is kind of a strategy for tomorrow for the RTA board. And I've got some ideas on that and how we can still solicit some thoughts from not only obviously the TMC, but also the board, and then what that'll look like in terms of, I'll call it an iteration to get to a final plan. So, but thank you. Absolutely appropriate.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mike, I just want to make sure I understand this table down here at the bottom. It says unencumbered cash balance of RTA TPT through 6/30. So that 139.5 million is all of the available RTA money that we expect is available for projects. Does that include the FY26 projected revenues as well?
So, Madam Chair, I'm going to let James expound on that, but what I want to make sure, because I maybe should have spent a little more time on it. There was question about the fund balance and how much cash we had in the bank. And I challenged that. And it turns out that all of that cash was shown here. It's been shown here for an extended period. It's just, and it could be just terminology. When we talk about unencumbered, all that means is it's not assigned to a project. When it's assigned, that means it's already been allocated to a specific project. But from a bottom line standpoint, those dollars are all there. So the 139.553 million is in fact the amount of the shortfall, including or accounting for all of the fund balance.
Including next year's
Yeah,
2020.
James?
Madam Chair, no, this amount does not include fiscal 26. Preliminarily, it would be another 70 million or so, and it's shown in the budget. This 139 is an accumulation over many years of reserve amounts that were never programmed and of course accrual of interest over a long period.
139 minus 7.
Plus 70, hopefully.
Yeah, let's make sure we're clear on that, James. So the 139 is through the end of, last month, correct?
Yeah.
And there's an additional 70 million that we'll take in within 26?
If revenues come in as we expect, there would be an additional 70 million or so at the conclusion of fiscal 26.
Okay, so will that number drop by 70 million then?
No, it would be 210 million.
So it'll increase 200 to 210 million?
Yes. And there's also an interest component that we did not attempt to calculate because we would have to calculate the burn rate. It's very difficult to do. But in the last fiscal year, that fund balance, that cash balance of 346 million accrued about $7.5 million in interest.
And just a point of clarification on that, the 100 or the 7.5 million-ish that we receive in interest annually is included in the fund balance, correct?
It is, yes.
So it's not, there's not an additional pot that's out there.
No.
Any questions?
I'm so sorry. Yes, sir. Yeah.
We're short 139 million, but we haven't included $70 million worth of revenue coming in. It seems like we're short less than that rather than the 200 that you're saying. Is that a $70 million of expenses that are for 26 or $70 million of revenue?
So if we look at the entire fund balance, it's in that funding need sheet that was shared with the board 2 or 3 months ago. We had projected the FY25 and FY26 revenues at that time. We just hadn't separated them out, but in aggregate, the money was there. So it's correct still to say that based on the calculations in that funding sheet, as they were calculated, that 143 million is accurate as it relates to the cash balance. These are not additional funds. They're just, as Mr. Ortega said, they're currently not programmed on a particular project, but they were accounted for in that funding needs sheet. So unfortunately, if we were to keep the calculation as it is, it would be 143 million short.
Is this?
Yeah, sure, please. Let me wait 1 second. That answer your question?
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm thinking. Bill will-
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
That sounds
that's why we're
good.
here. Can we do that again?
So yes, of course. So we had projected that these dollars would be available. Just as Mr. Ortega said, we had not separated them and shown them specifically as an unencumbered cash balance. But if you look at the 25 and 26 RTA budgets, we are accounting for those revenues. And then we have surpluses in those years. So we're showing the entire pot there. This is simply separating out what hasn't been assigned to a project. So they're unencumbered in the sense that today they don't belong to a project and they're in the bank. But we know by fiscal 29, one of those projects will absorb these dollars. So it's difficult to look at the funding needs sheet and talk about the 143 and then also talk about this as, available money, because yes, it is today, but it won't be in 5 years.
That's good.
How much money do we have and how much do we have in expenditures by the end of 26? Projected.
Based on the 26 budget or
If we look at the dollars you've got today, we assume there's another 70 million coming in 26 and the work plan for RTA. How much are we short? Projected.
well, we're not short in fiscal 26. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what the shortfall would be at the end of fiscal 26 today. I don't have those numbers, but if you look at, we're just looking at the entire program. So based on the 26 budget, the revenues and the expenditures, we will have a $70 million surplus. So our revenues will exceed our expenditures in fiscal 26 based on projects that have a new allotment of
He's talking
budget
flat cash flow.
for fiscal 26, based on just the 1 year.
Yeah.
There's $70 million not expended.
Matt,
I'm sorry, Shane.
Sure.
raised hand.
do these numbers factor in the cost for transit?
They do.
Okay, so that's all in there. And how much do we need as a region to complete all of the projects that we've committed to? We've got the amount for the 4 deferred projects, but the 17 more, whatever that number is, that have yet to be completed, what's the outstanding IOU to complete those projects as we best know today?
I believe Mr. Ellis could probably answer that more effectively.
I'm afraid. Shane, can you ask that again?
I'll try.
How much are we short?
So we understand the cost, whether it's 250 or 360 on the 4 deferred projects. But there are a lot of other projects that haven't been completed that were on the list for the current RTA. What's the IOU to complete those projects as we best know it today?
Six. Madam Chair, Mr. Ellis, based on the funding need sheet, the total cost for the deferreds and what's in, or we shouldn't call them deferreds, but the 4 projects placed in RTA Next and the current RTA was about 1.16 billion. But those numbers are a year or 2 old, and Mr. Ellis is updating those currently. So those will be in short order. We'll have new numbers.
So just to restate that, and I appreciate the difficulty in
Yeah,
nailing
sorry.
this thing down. I really do. But so for this region to deliver all of the remaining projects that are either have been started and not complete or haven't been started and not complete, including the 4 deferred projects, we're looking at a $1.16 billion price tag.
Yes.
Is that correct?
As of fiscal 23 and fiscal 24, when those, or calendar, I should say, 23 and 24, when those cost to complete exercises were last done. So the deferreds, I believe, were updated last in fiscal in summer of 23, and RTA current, Rick updated late last summer.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I really appreciate South Tucson stepping forward and saying, hey, we've got something that we need to have heard and considered as we look to the future for the next round of funding. I don't want to shortchange this conversation at all, but I just want to put on the table that I wrestle terribly with the thought of not coming together as a region on how we put a close, how we bow tie and close the current RTA before having discussions about what the future holds. I can't emphasize that enough, and I'm ready to put some thoughts out on the table in terms of what that closure looks like. And we talked last week about
maybe two different schools of thought in terms of how to close out RTA one or the current RTA. And when, Madam Chair, you feel like it's appropriate to start venturing that way, but I'll just put it on the table. I struggle. I appreciate what South Tucson said. I'm sure all of our agencies, if we're going to revisit RTA next, we've got voices that need to be heard and a lot of details to iron out. Quite frankly, I can't even get my head wrapped around that right now until we figure out, okay, what does closing out the current RTA look like?
Thank you. And Shane, give me one second. First of all, I want to say, gentlemen, I hope, thank you. And nobody is here today to play a gotcha game. We're all working on numbers together. So we really appreciate us trying to noodle through together as we figure it out. Sam, you had a question. Can we, is it?
It's
still
related.
them- And it's related to that?
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
related to
And then
that.
we'll
Yeah,
flip it.
but I think before Shane offers his suggestions, I just want to make sure I understand, Mike. So we're talking about revenues right now. We've not gotten into the cost estimate exercise of all the remaining projects. So I just want to make sure that we're not talking, this is 139.5 million is not how much short we are to complete those projects. It's how much cash we have in the bank today. And then at the end of 26, we'll have another 70 million cash in the bank, 210, potentially 210 million. So that sounds like to me, we all agree on this. The next step is we move into and look at all the projects and the cost estimates and then how much it's going to cost minus how much is built in the tip over the 5 years. There should be a shortfall there. There should be a number that we're short. And then you take into account the cash balance on hand. And then whatever short is after that is the number we're looking for. I just want to make sure that is what we're
Madam
talking
Chair,
about.
I think though that I need to put a finer point on what Sam just said. If we're talking about cash in the bank, that's this $346 million number. And then we have to take out encumbrances and all that kind of stuff. And so unallocated, unearmarked monies, we're talking about the 139 plus the 70 million. But we've got more cash than that in the
That's right.
bank. I just want to put a
Right.
finer
Thank you,
point
Shane.
on that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Paul,
I don't want to complicate this too much, but with respect to the work that was just done on where we stand with the completion of the projects, I notice in the tip, there's projects that have encumbered money, and that goes to this whole encumbered discussion of projects that really don't have a ghost of a chance of getting started even by the end of FY26. Could we reevaluate those projects that can't move forward because there isn't the money in the tip right now for them? Can we adjust the tip to take a look at those projects that have the ability to start now or very soon and just reformulate this so that we're not having projects holding money that just are going to take and sink other projects that could go. And really start to work on a cash flow diagram. I think the only way to truly get this is get commitments from the jurisdictions on when your project can go, a realistic, and not use the end of FY26 as that. Yeah, we're going to be there, wink, wink at the end. Realistically, when are you going to go and start to get that so that we know what the
Thank you.
balance is?
and maybe Paul and I think, and it ties into what Shane said and others, to me, we're at that point where it's time to bifurcate a bit our discussion of what can we do with RTA and are we going to be done? And then how do we look forward at RTA next? And then with that, there's the two elements. There's revenue, there's expenditures, and we're still wrestling with both sides of that equation. But what I've been talking with Mike about and my concern is we work for an RTA board that challenged us to come back and help them get ready for a March 10th election. And that board meets tomorrow. And I think we've done that. We've got a plan. We got things we have to work on. Part of what I think we want to look at today for just a moment is that, does that remain our recommendation to that board tomorrow? Have we done enough to make sure that we can go to the voters confident and proud of what we've done with RTA, that we can continue to go to the RTA board and say, we're a go on a recommendation to March 10th for RTA next?
Madam
And I'll
Chair,
just tell you, I'm concerned that we are not.
Madam Chair, Mr. Shamir has had his hand up
Oh.
online.
I am so, well, he went all the way up. Tim, I apologize. I can't, Ortega said, don't call on you. Anywho,
Hey,
that's, give me
this
one
thing
second.
on?
Thank you.
This
And
thing
so
on?
that's, I think it's just worth a moment to stop and say, let's be realistic about where we are. Do we need to uh, look at whether we think we're ready to go to the voters? And anywho, Mr. Tamur, my apologies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No worries. I echo what you just said. I have a couple of thoughts. One is, first of all, thanks to Mike and the team for putting together data on costs and revenues in a way that actually is understandable, even if it's still emerging and still, I think we're shooting around the target. We're pretty close to being able to answer the questions that everybody has about what's the gap? What's, as Mr. Ortega would famously say, what's the bogey on RTA 1? And until we get that cleared, my mind really has almost no space to think about RTA next. But I'll indulge myself for a moment to say, if I live in a world where I think there's an RTA next, which I don't know that I live in that world, I don't know that the plan is ready. I don't know that it was crafted in a way that was from a 2026 perspective as opposed to a 2006 perspective. There's a lot of issues with RTA Next, which is why I've largely ignored it for the last year. So until we get RTA 1 figured out, I can't in good conscience say anything about RTA Next. But
Thank you.
that's what I have, Jen.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Well, so one of the things that's occurred to me in this last week, we developed a plan and had a lot of conversation over the last couple of years about, do we look at pessimistic or optimistic, or what's the projections we should look at? And we developed a plan, and I'm looking at the last 20 years and saying we're about, what, $1 billion short. How do we project forward the numbers and overlay what we think are the actual right projections going forward? So again, I think I agree. I think we still got some work to do on the plan, but then Shane and then back to Sam.
Actually, I think,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some point like.
I think I saw
Terry,
Terry's
come
hand
over
up
here.
first.
Terry,
Okay, okay, perfect.
cool. And then Shane and Sam.
Okay, so thank you. At the risk of sounding, I think you're all right. In every aspect that you've talked through, there's pieces to this. So let's try to dissect them one at a time. And I think back to Tim's point, trying to get our arms around RTA 1 has really been the last 12 days to really just try to get a lot of these answers put out there. So a couple things. Number one, I think let's go back to, and Sam, you're right on target, right? It's revenue and then the cost. So let's talk about the cost just for a quick minute. Rick, what is the cost of the 4 projects that, if assuming the scope is not changed, what is the cost of putting those projects out the door? You said between 350 and 360. Is that correct?
Right, yes, that's correct,
Thank you.
based on updated estimates.
Fine. That's fine.
Like-
Just
Oh, sorry,
350,
yes.
360. Okay.
All right,
What is the shortfall that we are projecting of the program at the end of next year? It's 143, is that correct?
143.
I'm sorry, I said next year, the tip, through the tip.
Keeping those 4
No,
projects in.
forget
as
about
per-
the 4 projects. We already know that number. Now, all of the projects that are remaining, what is the number that we are short to deliver the program, but for those 4 projects? I believe the answer is 143 million. Is that right?
Mr. Ortega, may I add to that?
Please, yeah.
It's
That's why we're having this
143
conversation.
143 million it includes segments, grant 5 and 6, for instance, with no programming in the tip. So it goes a bit beyond the tip, but it is 143 as it's currently calculated.
Okay. So we're basically at I want to make sure we're clear here. We're at 493 million. Let's call it 500 million. Is the shortfall of the RTA 1 program. We've identified revenues. Now keep in mind that this does not include infusing dollars from the regional funds in the future. I'm just looking at a snapshot today. If I were to say to you, what do you have programmed right now today? all sources right now today through the tip, right? What is that shortfall? And I think the number is close to 500 million.
It is because we would have to, if we're including the RTA next, the deferred projects in the original scope, then yes, it would be close to 500 million.
Okay. So that's the number. We'll confirm that today. We'll confirm. So we'll confirm that, right? And because that's the cost. That's the cost side. We'll confirm that. And tomorrow morning, when we meet with the board, we're going to have an absolute number and we'll be ready to go. But that's basically a thumbnail sketch going back to Sam's point. The cost to complete RTA 1 is about 500 million, which is, if you do the math simplistically, if you allocate all the regional money, that's where we get the additional 15 years of revenue. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the dollars themselves in terms of revenues. I think the revenues conversation, the 139 million is what is unencumbered. And as we've defined and talked about, those are dollars that are available. And I'll go back to Shane's point. You know, it's actually 365 million that we have in the bank, right? But we have allocated certain pieces of that, certain components of that to projects. So if, you know, we could look at, you know, the 364 million, but that's already counted for, if you will, in those other projects. Okay. So the conversation then is, as time goes on, as James mentioned, as time goes on, pieces of that $139 million unencumbered or unassigned will be assigned to projects as time goes on. And that's already built into the model. Having said all that, the shortfall of the programmed, we'll call it time frame, is 143 million or thereabouts. Okay. So, you know, back to Tim's point, we're really trying to make this as simple as possible. You know, I think that there's a lot of pieces out here that are challenging.
It's nobody's fault, but it's as clear as mud.
Well, we're trying to
It's complicated.
We're trying to get that hose off and hose off that. It's Tucson high math. This is Douglas high math, right? Douglas high math. Douglas Bulldogs. But so again, we're open to suggestions. If you think there's a better way to show it, man, we're all ears. This is what we've come up with to try to give you a snapshot what this looks like and how we can really explain the situation that we're in, which is, you know, pretty staggering shortfall, right? I mean, it's a big number. We have solutions for that, right? We know that there's opportunities for us to address that, but that number is pretty big. And I'm not sure that we ever really pointed to it and say, wow, this is a big number. You know, we really kind of been focusing on that smaller number, you know, the 140 million-ish has really been the conversation. But I think in order to deliver what we promised the voters in 06, we've got to include those four projects, at least in the conversation. Doesn't mean that we would do it that way, but I think it's important. It gives us a more accurate overall picture. Last thing I'll mention, Jan had suggested that the election, the directions for the election, March of 26. I'll take just a quick minute to remind you what those dates look like. If we continue down the path for a March 10th election, March 10 of 2026, the Board of Supervisors needs to act on the language and the ballot language as well as the plan September 2nd, which means that we have to get the information to the board, to the county staff by August 26th. The RTA board meets August 25th. So we've got about 7 weeks. And that is completion of the RTA next plan and ballot language in order to get it ready for the March election. So I just want to, I'm fine having whatever conversations we want to have and whatever other options, but unless we make a conscious decision to not go after a March 26 election, then, you know, the marching orders to the staff is we've got to get moving and get that done. I said that was the last thing. I wanted to make one other comment. Shane asked about transit. Did that include transit? You said yes. That includes transit through June 30 of 2026, right?
Correct. It's just through the current budget.
That's important.
It's
So-
huge.
So that's a big deal. I just want to make sure, yes, it includes transit through the end of the program, which is June 30, 2026.
I think
Just
the
wanted to
last
make
meeting, did we say it's about 32 million a year? It's
So,
transfer.
great question. I do have a handout for that if you'd like. Just happen to have one, which I
Yep,
think
thank
might be.
I got Shane, Sam, Terry. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Go ahead.
Sir.
Well, if it's still along this, then maybe others should go first because I'm prepared to introduce maybe some thoughts that take us in a different direction.
Are we prepared to have, are we ready to kind of pivot to, are we done with RTA?
Do you want to look at the, no, I'm just asking, do you want to look at the transit piece?
I think it's important. to see
Just take a
those.
little sidebar on the transit, I
Yes,
think is.
thank you.
While Mike is handing this out, Madam Chair, you know, the ballot, we're focused and rightfully so, we're focused on the corridor projects that we've communicated to this region that we would deliver through the current RTA program. But there are other elements. Are those other elements, I mean, the transit, we've talked about transit, and that's those numbers through the end of 2026 are calculated in, but are all the other things that we're part of it, are those also calculated into these numbers? That's a question that I have before I pivot.
Is what calculated in?
The other elements.
The other elements of we're focusing on the corridor projects,
Oh, I
but there's
see.
other elements, you know, and so I don't know what all that,
For the completion through June 30.
the completion of
Well,
the current RTA.
Delivery of RTA. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Rick, do you know, or James, does anyone know? The conversation is one of delivery of RTA 1. So we know that the transit component would end June 30 based on our delivery of that service.
Yes.
There are other elements. Are there other elements left to complete under RTA 1 other than the corridors?
Would we be including elements 2 and 3?
Whatever other elements to
So-
deliver, so we promised the voter we're going to deliver X. And what does that look like? All inclusive, not just roadways. Roadways obviously is the biggest piece, but do we have other elements that we have to account for delivery going forward?
So those other elements, there are dollars programmed. They are targeted dollars at this point. They are not to ballot for elements 2 and 3. Everything was pushed to roadway element back in 2014, I believe. And the funding need sheet that was provided back in April did account for the other elements at a much reduced amount. So they are addressed, but not as they were shown in the 2006 ballot. A much smaller amount.
Problematic.
And just an asterisk, I know that at the TMC a couple meetings ago asked for legal opinion about what qualified as scope change and what we could do and not do. And I'd just be interested in when they review that to also help us understand how we made all those other changes potentially, and were they a scope change? Thank you. Carmen, you want to talk to this or go back? to
Yeah,
it?
specifically just on that
Yeah,
point,
thank you.
I think we need to see what the underspend is on those
The other
other
stuff.
non-roadway corridor elements, right? If we're talking about, and I asked this question at the last meeting, and I don't know that we can answer it today, but what do we consider a successful delivery of RTA?
Yeah.
And if we're gonna decide that, we have to understand what the underspend is on those non-roadway corridor elements. So that would be helpful information to get at a future meeting.
Thank you.
I've got ready.
And at this point, I've got Shane, Sam, and Terry. Are we ready to maybe spend some time talking about whether we think,
It's all strategy.
Thank
You wanted to quickly look at
okay,
the
please, yeah, let's
transit.
look at transit.
Just quickly look at it.
But I think, so thank you, Carmine, and what we're looking at is the realization is that we skinnied up other of the elements in order to pay for roads, and we need to come back and say, if we are going to actually focus and say to the voters, we've delivered RTA, we have some other dollars that we need to put into the equation at this point. Thank you. Transit.
So we'll spend just a minute talking about transit. One of the things that we talked about last time was the severe, what I'll call severe impact to transit operations region-wide should we not have a source of funding for transit beyond June 30, so July 1 of 2026. And so what I attempted to do, or we at staff, actually, I didn't do it, is take that 30 million, it's actually 31 and change, and break it down by jurisdiction, by area, if you will, to try to give you a sense of what, as best we can tell, based on zip codes, based on folks calling in, what that impact could be. And this is again for this year, for FY 24. That's last year, I guess we're already in 26. So I wanted to just give that to you, present that to you, and show that there is a very significant impact across the region. And it's not just one entity or one group, it's everybody. And there is $52 for Shane and that one deal that when you called in, for that person.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But you can see even in Shane's point, or part, there is a pretty significant on some of the other pieces. So, that's just on the paratransit side. And I think it's all inclusive. And I think that's important that we talk through just so that and then we can go forward, because that, in my opinion, this is something that really needs to be brought forth. I know you all have been talking about it for several months now. I just want to make sure that you had that data in front of you. That's all I wanted to just show it to you. So.
Thank you. Question, good to just have this. Okay, thank you. This one I've got Shane, Sam, and Terry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mike and staff. Again, I echo Tim's comments and kudos for putting it so nicely packaged like this so we can see, and the data just continues to get better and better. In terms of informing, right? We don't like the outlook because it doesn't make any of us feel very comfortable. We are all each and every one of us are here at the table with sincere desires to find a path for success for the region. I feel it. I feel it from everybody, all the comments. We want what's successful for the region. A question, I think a very good question, was asked earlier. Jan, you're the one that put it on the table. As we look at the plan that we put together, that was the culmination of like 3 years of work. So it's no small task. And I don't say what I'm about to say lightly because I was a part of that effort. But as I look at that plan, I don't see that we've learned any lessons at all. I see that it was a very parochial attempt to everybody get, what they can in the process. And I believe that's what landed us where we're at today, because, we're sitting here and our eyes got really big. And we thought we could do all these projects, and here we are, 21 projects, if I have my number right, 21 projects that we have not delivered to the region. That is not finger pointing. There's a lot of reasons why we weren't able to deliver. And when we look at the next RTA plan, it's the same thing. We're cramming projects, period 1, 2, 3, and 4, and nobody's asking the questions, how are we going to get that done? We're just putting it on the table saying, we want our piece of the pie and here's what we want to do. Here's our wish list. I think an attempt for an election in March of 26 is riddled with complexities that prevent me from feeling any kind of confidence whatsoever that we would be successful in getting across the finish line. And if my intuition on that is correct, I think a downward vote by our region in March really hampers us and our ability to do anything as a region going forward for some period of time. I think we need to take that very seriously. I think that's the political reality that we face as a region. One might ask, well, maybe not do it in March, maybe do it in November. It took us 3 years to develop a plan to present to the board. And if we've got concerns about that plan as a TMC, and I'm really concerned about our success here as a region in recommending an election to our board in March, even in November. So it got, everybody around the table thinking about different options. I know that as I consider looking forward, I have to be resolved with how we're going to close out the current RTA. And I can't get my mind wrapped around that future until I do. That said, we talked last week as a TMC about two fundamental schools of thought in terms of how to do that. We have been on a trajectory where our minds are, in order to close out the current RTA, we have to deliver on all of the projects that were listed in 2006. I think that that's an unrealistic outcome. I don't think that that's a way for success. I think that there's another very palatable option for us in terms of defining how the current RTA is closed out. And that's delivering a message, a well-defined message to the region on the realities that this region faced over the last 20 years. We had our best foot forward in forecasting what those revenues were going to be. We were challenged by unimaginable roller coaster ride with inflationary costs. We got the recession, we had COVID, we had supply chain issues, we had all sorts of different problems that hit us, all of which I think culminated to the fact that our region did not deliver the revenues that we thought it was going to deliver. And hence we weren't able to deliver all of the projects that we had hoped to deliver. However, we have this much money left to us that you have given to us as a region. Thank you, taxpayers. And as good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, here's how we're going to deliver and what we're going to deliver on using the money that you have given to us. No more of this business about, okay, how do we lap over gap financing and who's going to tax what and who's going to get a piece of that and a piece here. And you guys, I'm telling you, that is fraught with all sorts of different problems. And I think it's led us to having the struggles that we have today, to be honest with you, in terms of our ability to talk and move forward. I think if we all come together on this idea that closing the current RTA out is really delivering that report back to the region and a commitment in terms of how we're going to finish out spending 100% of the monies that we have, what projects, what does that look like, and then calling it is, in my opinion, a very positive way to end the current RTA. And what it does is it puts our region on a very, very good footing because over the next several years, the region is going to see a bunch of projects getting delivered per the message that we delivered to them. And it sets us up for success, whether we go to the ballot or whether we find another mechanism to pay for transportation needs as a region going forward. One thought is the ballot at some point in time, and I'm arguing that it's not in 2026. I think that that's a foolhardy errand. I really do. The other option, though, it's been floated, is perhaps maybe the county takes on the task of implementing a dedicated half-cent sales tax. And I think we can start talking about what that looks like in terms of allocation to the city, the county, to the jurisdiction, other jurisdictions through the TIP or independent programs, from the county and the city, and kind of move forward. But if we go to the ballot in 26 and we fail, I see it very, very difficult for our region to rebound anytime soon from that type of outcome.
Thank you.
So I'll put that on the table.
Thank you. And we've got a couple, but I want to just make a comment then to me, looking at that. When I think of it, though, it's the three buckets. We have to talk about what are we going to be doing with RTA? And then even if we identify a funding source, if the county were to do a half cent and we had a funding source, that's another bucket. We've not even addressed what's the expenditure side, because simply saying the county will take in the half cent and we'll allocate it. We still have a whole lot of work to do as a region about how that money gets distributed. Or you can just say, trust us, and I'm good with that too. But yeah, but assuming that's not the option, there's still a lot of work to do.
Madam
Like
Chair,
those are the three.
one more point to what I was saying. I know that there are models out there where a region through a sunset sales tax or taxing mechanism pays for ongoing expenditures. I think that's bad practice, to be honest with you. It puts the region in a very compromising position whenever that tax sunsets. It's how the crap are we gonna pay for this program, i.e. the transit program? That lends me to believe that perhaps there's some merit, something that we can really get behind as a region in considering perhaps an ongoing dedicated transportation, not transit necessarily, but the big umbrella transportation type tax through the county. That would be an ongoing revenue source to pay for things like transit. And it would be a program that we could all figure out through policy how each agency is going to participate in that transportation project or program. Thanks.
I'm sorry, it's Sam, Terry, and Paul.
Madam Chair, Mike, I was just curious, when do we think we'll have updated cost estimates for all the remaining projects? Is that for next week's TMC meeting? And how can we help with that process?
My nervousness is the updated cost estimates, and I'm going to let Rick address that here in a minute. But the updated cost estimates are a snapshot. And that's what really makes me nervous, Sam. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Direct. And that's what makes me nervous. And so I think part of the challenge that we've had is how do we project costs? And you know, Shane's comments are spot on, right? And nobody predicted any of those things. We are going through that exercise now. But I caution you that we can't hang our hat totally on that. I mean, I think we've got to build in escalators, you know, all that stuff as best we can. But then all of a sudden it becomes so big that, you know, you kind of scratch your head and say, well, is that realistic? And are we able to deliver that? But I wanted to just preface that as we go forward. Rick, can you answer when those will be?
Can I just ask for clarification? Sam, are you talking about RTA?
Yeah.
Rather
yeah,
than, because I don't think
RTA.
we talked at all about looking at
No,
the expenditures. Are the expenditures that we've already estimated that we've put in our proposed plan for RTA next still accurate?
Yeah, I was talking specifically about RTA 1 because I think what if I could just interject before Rick goes, what I'm struggling with is what solutions can we recommend to deliver RTA 1? And I think the cost estimate is a piece of that picture. I agree with you, Mike. It's a snapshot in time. And how do you project what like Grant Road 5 and 6 in 5 years is going to cost to construct? You know, I think we can take an educated guess, but we don't know exactly what that's going to be. So that's just the piece I'm struggling with, is that this is a really clear picture of the financial revenue side. I'm still struggling with how do we, and you know, full disclosure, we're trying to track it as well.
Right.
And it is difficult because we're using the tip and then we're using cost estimates, but then the cost estimates change.
Sure.
And so it's evolving, and I'm just trying to understand how we can help
Thank you.
move that conversation forward.
Rick, I'm sorry.
My goal is to have those all ready in the meetings with the jurisdictions by late next Monday or Tuesday at the latest.
So when we meet next Wednesday, we may have. some-
That's my goal.
Thank you. Thank you. Sam, is that Terry?
Madam Chair, so I think what Shane just talked about has changed a little bit what I want to say. And I'll start with, I think that individually, we are all kind of coming to the same conclusion, a collective aha moment for us where we realize that the most important thing to get across the finish line is the RTA 1. And figuring out a path forward. You know, I've heard it from Paul, I've heard it from Sam, Madam Chair, from you, from Shane, from Tim. It's difficult to think about RTA next until we wrap up the RTA. And I think there is a real opportunity to go. I 100% agree, Shane. I appreciate the fact that you said it. I cannot foresee a situation where we go to the voters in 2026 and we come out on the winning side of a vote I think there's just too much to be done and not enough time to get there. I do like the idea of messaging to the community. I think Shane hit a lot of key things. I think the one thing that was missing is the fact that in the messaging, we have to include the great successes that RTA has brought, right? So it's one thing to say, look, we've had a lot of challenges in the last 20 years and we can all list those things out and we can talk about them, to the end. And everybody understands that. And I think most people would be empathetic toward that. And they would probably be empathetic toward the reality that trying to predict 20 years into the future how much money you're going to have and how much projects are going to cost over that time frame, it's a shot in the dark. And we came up short, obviously. And so I think that people can understand that and they can see the projects that have been delivered and highlighting those and elevating those and saying, look what we've been able to accomplish. And now we have a path forward. This is our plan to go forward with what's left of the RTA. We're calling RTA 1 done. We're moving forward. We're including whatever projects need to be included. And I think that's a much larger discussion, right? And we go to the voters with that. Whether that's a RTA Next, which I would kind of tend to agree with you. If there's another avenue, maybe a 0.5-cent sales tax through the county is something that works. I don't really know. I haven't given that much thought. But I do think that the discussion needs to focus on RTA, getting it completed, finding a pathway forward, having a really clear message to the community of what's been accomplished, what needs to be done, and how we're going to get there.
So Bob, you came a few minutes late and we've dumped RTA. So-
Yeah.
All right, yeah, you caught it. No,
RTA next.
any questions? Paul?
We've been kind of talking amongst ourselves in Oro Valley along the same lines as Shane, and we're really and pretty much in alignment with what he just said. We're stumbling over the corridor projects, the very specific projects, the individual projects, yet we have a lot of successes through the transit, safety, through the environmental that have been accomplished over the last 20 years. Is there a way to bifurcate? Does not only, the TMC, but the board have the appetite to consider looking at those constant elements, creating a revenue source, a tax that takes those constant elements onto the future, separates them from the specific projects that need to be done over the 20 years. And looking at the corridor projects as maybe the corridor projects are the RTA Next. And then there's a transportation tax and they're different. It could all add up to the 5% and be, maybe 2% for a transportation tax that has the safety environmental transit and a 3% tax at some point in the future when we're ready to, when the RTA 1 is closed and we finish up all those open corridor projects.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
One of the issues that we'll always be faced with and challenged with as a region, if we continue to go down this 20-year plan with the kind of finality that's expected of us, is that it's impossible. It really is. It would require of us, again, one of the lessons learned is if we were to do a RTA Next, a 20-year thing, it would require us to do every 5 years a true up with the public, with our agencies, what reality is, because we haven't done that, right? So that would be one of the lessons learned. As I've been thinking about the idea of the county taking on a dedicated 0.5-cent sales tax and our corridor projects and other safety elements or whatever get funneled through that program, it addresses that issue because it's real time. It's a 5-year tip or whatever, right? And so we're not faced with this, hey, we're making a promise today to deliver something in 20 years and being expected to understand what the economy is going to do, what inflation is going to do, and supply chain issues, right? So I continue to struggle with what does success really look like for our region? And that struggle, that wrestle has continued to push me in certain ways. Like, we have to be transparent with the public. We have to tell them, here's our journey over the last 20 years. Here's reality. You've given us this much money, and this is what we've been able to accomplish. Thank you for that add-on. We gotta highlight our accomplishments because they're big. And we commit ourselves to what we're going to be able to deliver over the next couple of years to finish it out. And then we looked to something different, whether that's an RTA next through the ballot. I would argue that there are a lot of things that are making sense to me in thinking of a dedicated tax to the county, to be quite honest with you. If we can make sure that it's, we've got a piece that's carved out for the ongoing transit program or the safety elements or what have you. And then everything else is within the framework of like HERF. It's very, very focused on what we can do with that money. And it's more current time instead of trying to forecast something 20 years from now. Anyway, I'll be quiet. Thanks.
Mike, did you?
Yeah.
You have anything to say?
Yeah, so thank you for the conversation. I think it's a healthy one. Shane, thanks for bringing this stuff up. So I can't disagree with what you all are discussing. What I'm focused on is direction from the board to go in March and what that looks like. What I'm hearing from you is we as TMC may recommend, board, let's pause that. But I have to tell you, if we say pause that, then my gut is a pause means we're not going in March. I mean, because there's no way to take time to have this discussion in a way that would give us opportunity to get this thing on the ballot for March. And we just don't have time to do that. And I don't want to waste time, with the staff coordinating and organizing that effort if we're going to go in a different direction. So that's one thing to think about.
Well, Mike, can we pause on that and just hit that point? I mean, I think we've been charged with making a recommendation to the board on what success looks like, to be honest with you. Now, their mind is thinking, okay, election in 2026. But our job as professionals is to put a recommendation on the table for them. We can go through the motions, we can check the boxes, we can meet the dates and get something on the ballot. But I'm telling you, I don't think that that's success. And if the rest of the group thinks that's success, I'm just one vote on the table, right? But I don't think that's success. And so I think we're responsible to provide a recommendation to them on what success looks like.
So, Madam Chair, I'm not arguing the point about that. All I'm saying is the direction that I understood we were going down is a March 26th election. And so I've been organizing the staff to do that. Okay. So and I'm going to get to what success looks like here in a minute, because I listened very closely to what you all were talking about, because I think there's some nuggets there that we can really band around. So let's set aside the RTA next conversation. Let's go back to RTA 1. So RTA 1, I don't disagree at all that we should be providing options for how we get RTA 1 complete. Okay. I had not incorporated we'll call it a different funding source to complete RTA 1 other than regional monies. And so based on the math, very simplistically, it will take us 15 years from now of regional money to go towards completion of RTA 1 in the current scope, current configuration. Just very simplistically, that's what we're talking about. So that's option 1. Not ideal, not perfect, but it is an option that we could identify and say, look, here's a way to get RTA 1 complete. Okay. Should we infuse a different option or explore a different option? Yeah, that's fine. And that's great. But before we talk about and I've heard comments about, well, we'd have to talk about the distribution of those dollars if the county were to go down that path. The first order of business is delivery of RTA 1. So if we think about that, we have the shortfall for RTA 1. The first whatever number of years, so let's use round numbers. If it's 500 million shortfall, that's a 5-year allocation of $100 million roughly a year to complete RTA 1. So for 5 years, if we did that half-cent sales tax, that would go directly into completing RTA 1. Okay. So again, an option, but the conversation around what the distribution of those dollars looks like beyond that is something we can have. We have some time, right? So the first order of business is, what does that configuration look like in terms of the funding to complete RTA 1? And then we can have a conversation about, okay, how do we distribute dollars and so forth.
Terry and Shane. Go ahead, Shane.
No, I'd like this portion of the conversation to work. Okay.
Thank you.
In my mind, Mike, it all goes back to how are we defining the completion of the current RTA? If completion of the RTA means that we're delivering all of the projects, that's one course that we have to, I mean, that defines, that's a fork in the road. And that defines how we're going to talk, what our meetings are going to be about. I've simply presented on the table another option in terms of what completion means. It means we are making sure that every single dollar that we've gotten from the public through this tax is appropriately going where it needs to go. That's it. And so, I mean, that's a fundamental mind shift that we would ask the board to, to consider. But I think it's an important discussion to have because it does shape fundamentally two different options, two different discussions that we would be having, two different courses. Our actions would be entirely different depending on what course we take on that.
Let me ask you a question, Madam Chair, if that's okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to be long-winded here. So are you suggesting, this is a point of clarification for me. Are you suggesting that the delivery, when you say completion, the delivery would not necessarily mean all of those projects?
That's right.
So, okay, then we would have to have a conversation about how the ballot language is not delivered, which may need a voter, some type of voter approval or authorization. I say may because I don't know.
No, I agree. I think some legal clarity on what our obligation really is really important here. Because if legal says that we're really committed, we have to deliver 100% of these projects. What it also suggests is that by virtue of that mandate, the tax wasn't sufficient to get us there. You know what I mean? So there's a problem there. I think that it's righteous to say, hey, the public gave us X number of dollars to put towards fixing and helping our transit woes, our transportation woes. And that we are obligated to use that money for that purpose. And completion simply means, here's our annual report, here's what it looks like, and here's what we did, and here's why, and here's what we're committed to do to finish it up. Thanks.
Terry, then John.
So I would tend to agree exactly with what Shane is saying. There's two ways to deliver, depending on what the ballot language says. And I think what legal weighs in on and says with this is going to be vitally important. But I think we brought in a certain amount of money. Whatever money is left, we use to complete whatever projects are the highest priority for the jurisdictions that still have projects. And I believe that that's probably City of Tucson and maybe Pima County. So I think we take whatever's left, we finish out whatever projects we've completed, RTA 1, and we need to move on and develop a new plan, a new path forward. So I would tend to agree 100% with what Shane just said if it legally meets the ballot measure.
John and then Tim.
So if we embark on a strategy that Mike described, the board, we're going to rely on the next 15 years of regular revenues. That doesn't have to commit us, entirely to that strategy. If we say, in the meantime, we will continue to work at how we deliver this first RTA program. And that could mean a year from now, 2 years from now, we'd be back with a proposal to finish it. But it's not, absolutely, you commit to 15 years of regular revenues and you're done. There's no future RTA. So I think we need to think about whether we have to have an absolute strategy today that gets us to the very end of RTA 1 or gives us some time to really wrestle with this thing. That's my only point.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. Just gonna reflect on some of what Shane was saying. I'm certainly supportive of having a conversation about how do we define successful completion of RTA 1? And there could be more than one interpretation of that. I'm going to also say that failing to deliver the projects as promised to the voter is a failure to deliver RTA 1, from my opinion, from my perspective. And I would not be in support of not delivering the projects in the city of Tucson because we decided there wasn't enough money. So that's that. So again, open to the conversation, but I had to get on the record saying I have the opposite opinion of whether that's the definition of success. Thanks, Chair.
So I can fully appreciate, Tim, what you just stated. And I don't think it's an issue of not completing those projects. I think it's finding a different way to complete them. Closing out RTA and having a new way to bring those projects to fruition would be what was my thought.
All right, I'm just going to jump in. That's different from what I was hearing. So,
Madam Chair, I share all of the same concerns. I'm very worried about whether or not we can get a positive vote next year. And we're trying to squeeze it into the time frame that would work, but we need to get the positive vote. I mean, when it comes right down to it, without that, we got nothing. And I agree wholeheartedly that we need to go back to the voters and explain to them a resolution of RTA 1. We've got to tell them what happened. We've got to tell them why it happened, and we got to tell them how we're going to get it finished. I mean, we need to close that chapter. But there's part of me too that says the best time to talk to them about RTA next is as we're talking to them about how we're going to close out RTA 1. Because I think it's hard to get the voters' attention now and say, hey, we're closing this out, and expect them to want to hear again 2 years from now about how we're going to do something new. And so I think I don't know if we can do it or not, but I think if we could package the clearing up of RTA 1, here's how we're going to get everything resolved. We're going to use your dollars to get all of these projects built, and then have the same conversation, have a conversation in the same meeting with the voters about, and here's what we're doing on RTA next. And we've learned something from RTA 1. We're not going with the same level of forecasting of revenues, and we're a little bit more knowledgeable about inflation rates and real estate prices and all those kinds of things. I think if we could do it as a single package, I think we might have a better chance of getting the voters to listen.
Thank you. Let me do, Mike's going to speak, and I got Sam, Terry, and John.
Just a real quick comment to John's point, Madam Chair. So yes, I think that gives us time, right? In terms of if we were to say, let's pause on the election. We're not going to do that right now. We may do it later. We don't know for sure. Gives us opportunity to have more conversation about what a county sales tax could look like. In the meantime, we have this plan that soaks up all the regional money for 15 years. So at least we've bought ourselves some time, except for the transit. So as long as the conversation includes that transit piece, then I think we're good. I don't know, I don't know enough about it right this second, John, to say to you, yes, we can do that, and we'll just include that as a part of those costs going forward or not. I don't know that. So I'll have to do a little research on that. But I do think that could buy us time if we can figure out a way to fund the transit. My gut is that if we can put other dollars to that, it'll just delay the projects even longer. So instead of 15, it's going to be whatever, right? 20 or whatever. So I just caution on that, and we'll have to do a little research and work with the staff on that before we can figure it. Before I can say confidently, yeah, that's an option. So that's the thing.
Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, it's actually a great segue into my question. So I'm hearing a lot of concern from TMC members about a March election. And I know the criticality of a March election is so that the sales tax takes effect and we don't have a gap. If we miss March, there's other options for an election, but then that means it delays the beginning of the sales tax collection. If we've got $139 million in unencumbered cash balance in the bank, couldn't we use a portion of that to fund transit during that gap here? That's the only thing that's not being funded during that gap if there's no sales tax collection. So I don't know we need an answer now, but I think along the lines of what John's saying and what you're saying, Mike, maybe there are some other alternatives that aren't an absolute yes March election, no March election. It's maybe it's a May, maybe it's a November, gives us time to sort out RTA 1, gives us time to sort out transit, and then have that honest conversation with the voters. Maybe we need to not think so much in an absolute of a March election, and it doesn't have to be for today, but just I wanted to offer those thoughts.
Carrie and John, but I think what I just say, to me, what I'm looking at, what do we need to do as transportation for the next 20 years? And then what's the Tetris game look like of all the pieces that can be put into that puzzle to provide the different funding elements to cover everything we need in a period of time? And you're right that my concern is, yeah, we're hitting to March, so we don't have a gap. We're gonna have a bigger gap if we go. Carrie and John?
So I think the idea of going to the voters, and it seems like everybody's kind of on the same page about explaining what happened in with RTA 1 and figuring out a path forward. I am a little bit concerned about, and not that it couldn't be done, a little bit concerned about talking about RTA 1 and RTA Next in the same conversation. We sit around these tables, for years on end, talking about RTA and RTA Next. And I think having that kind of conversation with an entire population of, 100 of 1 million people, or whatever the voting number is, that's a difficult conversation to get them to see the intricacies of both RTA and RTA Next. And I don't know that it has to be, and I think that's kind of the point that Shane has been talking about. Does it have to be an RTA Next? Is that the only path forward? And it may be the best path forward. I'm not sure that it is. It may be a half cent. I'm not sure that is, through the county. But I think that has to be completely fleshed out before we go to the voters talking about RTA 1 and RTA Next, or whatever the other avenue is. And I do think that there's a path forward to fund all the projects that are currently on RTA 1, with whether that's a half cent, whether that's an RTA Next, and perhaps those projects that didn't get funded and didn't get completed in RTA 1 are first up, they have priority, whatever the case may be. But I do think that there's a way for us to meet those things.
So we keep talking about a conversation with the public, and what's rattling around in my head is how do we communicate that? We don't do that through an election that we know we're going to lose or perhaps lose, but we do have a regional master plan underway. I think we always have to have it current. So I'm thinking, isn't that an opportunity? We develop, a regional, well, we always have had a regional master plan, the RMAP, that tells us where we think we're headed as a region. And in that document, we can certainly convey to the public, here's what you got out of RTA 1. And there's some needs going forward, obviously, and how those will come about, we'll have to explore, but at least we've got a forum, I guess is what I'm looking at. How do we get that? And each individual jurisdiction, I think, probably has to take an action on that regional plan anyway. So there's a possibility that I think we can communicate that way.
And I want to go back, I know Mike's going to want to speak to this. I want to go back for a moment and say our job has been to take something to the board. We did that. We gave them a plan. We've been done. What I'm hearing for, they meet tomorrow, and I'd be interested in whether this body is ready to make a motion to modify a recommendation to the RTA board.
Madam Chair, I might be in a position to do just that, but I'd like to make a quick comment first about some of the flexibility that I think I see the potential of having through a countywide sales tax. I could see us saying, hey, we'd like to try a pilot program on this 10-year pilot program, see how it goes. Or we do it and we say, hey, for the first 5 years, we're actually doing a 0.6 tax for the first 5 years. And that extra money goes to the city to finish some of these extra projects that we've got going on. I just think that there's all sorts of flexibility built in to having a path through the county, as opposed to something that you have to use a crystal ball and you got to see 20 years ahead, and you go to and make promises to the public and just hope and pray that you can deliver. I just think that there's a lot of flexibility there. I would suggest that when we say, hey, we're gonna close out the current RTA, assuming that we've got a favorable report from legal that we can do this, that it's entirely a focus on the monies that we've been given in a report card of sorts, where we're saying, here's how we've performed over the last 20 years. Here's all the things we were able to deliver. Here's what we promise and commit to deliver before everything's said and done with this program. And then knowing that there's ongoing needs, we're going to be looking to this other route, whether it is an election. I keep talking myself more and more into probably the dedicated county sales tax as the mechanism. And we prioritize projects and we move forward through that process.
Yeah.
There was a belief that if all the money went to the county, they would spend it in the county and the municipalities wouldn't get their fair share. I mean, we hear that even on bond election monies and that sort of thing. It's like, well, you're spending it for you guys, but I don't get mine. It's nice to hear that maybe there is a sense that old mysticism about whether or not the county could actually play fair is maybe not as strong as it used to be. But that's one issue. The second issue is we've talked about a county dedicated half-cent sales tax for anything for a long time, and there have never been enough votes on the board. And before we start saying, gee, we think this is a better avenue, we need to ask ourselves seriously, is there a prayer of getting that passed?
Thank you. I just wanted to remind the group that it is a unanimous vote of the Board of Supervisors involved. So a pivot in asking the board to do this is obviously a campaign of its own, and looking at having the jurisdictions. And when I look at it, it's not the county taxing, it's perhaps, I've been thinking of it as shifting to sort of the governance structure of the half cent, one versus the other. And then to the first part of your comment, I think what those guardrails are, as I said earlier, we know it's almost the easier part to figure out where the money comes in. It's going to need all the same kind of work in a regional group and what's written into a code and a bunch of stuff that's the guardrails to make sure that there remains a regional plan for the distribution of those funds rather than just that vote. So, but thank you. Yeah. Are we ready to try? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Ballot language,
Yep.
but has there been talk about just doing an extension of RTA 1 for another 5 years? Will that be something that
Do you want to speak?
voters would extend? It just says here, we're explaining that our revenues fell short. We've got deliverables for RTA one. We need additional monies. Voters, what do you think if we just extend RTA one by another 5 years or whatever it takes to finish the deliverables? So that's part of the language and then tee it up what we ought to do in RTA.
Thank you. Did you want to?
Yeah, dude.
Speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't know the answer to that exactly. I believe that the statutes require it to be a 20-year plan when we go to the voter. We'll confirm that, but I just don't know that with absolute certainty. So that's my gut there. So as I think about the curveball you all are throwing at us here, I didn't even see the seams spinning here. I did actually, but let's think about the logistics here just for a minute. So first order of business, I think we honed in on that early on. What is the cost of the delivery of the program? I think, Shane brought up an important point, which is let's look at it holistically, right? And what that means and what those costs are for delivery of the program as a whole, which includes the elements, by the way, which, as James outlined, there was some decisions made on that. So I'll get my arms around that, but I think that's probably first and foremost. Second, if in fact we want to recommend, you all want to recommend and explore a county sales tax as an option, what could that look like? And I'm not talking about what does it look like in terms of dollars. I'm talking about what does it look like in terms of getting to a potential yes for that, right? And my gut is this, without knowing and having really explored this, but it would seem to me that the region as a whole would have to be behind this. So even though the mechanism is the County Board of Supervisors, the County Board of Supervisors is not going to do this on their own. And I think that all entities, all aspects of the region have got to be in support of that effort, which then means there's got to be understanding, and I'll even say agreement or consensus, if nothing more, on what the configuration and what the distribution of those dollars looks like going forward. Which brings me back to RTA Next, which could be the framework, may or may not be. But some framework would have to be identified so that the region then supports it. And when I say region, I'm talking about basically all of your entities, right? Support it in a way that then gives support to the Board of Supervisors, and quite frankly, in a very unanimous way. A strong message that says, look, here's what this looks like, and here's how this can be crafted so that you, Board of Supervisors, are part of the solution, if you will. But I think that's going to be, and so it's almost like crafting a new RTA Next, hate to call it that, but crafting a new RTA Next that will address all of those pieces, which means your pieces, and ultimately leading to a strong support for the board. And I'm just kind of throwing that out as an approach. Now, how we get there and the speed with which we do that and all those things is yet to be determined, right? But I go back to transit runs out of money June 30. So if we think of it very simplistically, we've got a line on corridor funding. We know what that could look like. Not ideal, not pretty, but it's there. So the focus then is how do we deal with the transit piece starting July 1 of 26. Sam asked a question which I hadn't thought about, which is, well, we've got $139 million that's unencumbered. Could we use that? I think the answer is probably, but keep in mind, we do that increase of shortfall, right? So those are monies that were already built into the shortfall. And so we use whatever money out of that, assuming we can. That means there's a shortfall on the other end. Certainly an option. I mean, we're already 500 million. What's another, right? But the bottom line is building that into the conversation so that we could buy ourselves a little time. Going back to John's point, we could buy ourselves a little time and saying, here's the plan. And oh, by the way, we infuse this cash. And we know we're going to, in essence, increase that shortfall, but we're okay with it because we've got this other plan. In a perfect world, we don't have to worry about that. And we have a solution, whatever that solution is, before July 1 of 26, which again, seems like an eternity away, but given, all of the gyrations that we go through, it's like a nanosecond. During the PAG management committee meeting, I think Jeanette's going to make a presentation on the RMAP. John, and I think that's a great idea. It's pretty far baked in terms of the way that we're approaching it, but maybe we could incorporate some language and some thoughts there to get back to the conversation about delivery and how what we'll call our success as a region on that. I will try to get some guidance on what delivery means. My gut there is that delivery means it's on the ballot, you deliver it. That's my gut, but I'll confirm that. My extensive legal background doesn't provide me with that. Douglas Bulldog, man. Yeah, the Douglas Law degree. But I'll confirm that because I think that's an important piece. And then at least we know what the foundation of the basis for that conversation is. Then we go from there. With regard to the flexibility, Shane, that you mentioned towards the end there, I think I think there's value there in talking different scenarios and different options. Because if we look at it as toe in the water, let's try this out for a county tax, that could be of value to demonstrate performance and accountability. And so the difficulty there, I think, will be because we have such, I'll use the term backlog of projects on RTA 1, it won't give us even a 5-year timeframe, will not give us much to show on how the region would use the dollars if we're just focused on completion of RTA 1, if in fact comes back that we need those dollars just to finish RTA 1. So potentially the 10-year horizon could give us both completion of RTA 1, the infusion of those dollars to that effort, as well as a 5-year availability of dollars for the rest of the region to have whatever conversation. Now, one thing to think about is we could have a conversation about what regional monies look like during that 5-year period. So if all of the dollars from a potential sales tax go to completion of RTA 1, today we've programmed regional money to go into RTA 1. If we have enough money coming from a half-cent sales tax to complete RTA 1, that could free up regional money. I say could, I don't know that. We'll have to scrub those a little bit, which then gives us some flexibility as a region so that everybody's not sitting around twiddling their thumbs, if you will, waiting for RTA 1 to complete. It gives us some other money to expend within the regional, on regional needs. So that's an opportunity that we might want to explore as well and think about as we go forward. So the last thing I'll suggest is if you want to explore this, I'm going to need direction from the board. And so I will need something from them tomorrow because all hands on deck to get March 26th, March 10th at
We need him.
6 a.m. is when we're starting. So
We need him. Thank you.
So-
I think we're ready for a motion from this group.
Madam Chair, Mr. Shamir has his hand up.
Thank you. Tim, I apologize again.
And I'm beginning to take this personally.
I'm so sorry. So
No,
sorry.
thank you, Madam Chair. Really just a quick comment that I think something's gelling here, and I know we're gonna find out a lot more tomorrow when Mr. Ortega is able to take something to the council. But I just want to acknowledge the fact that anything we're talking about in this form of a county tax is a pretty big ask of the Board of Supervisors. We're actually potentially asking them to step into a space where they're kind of maybe bailing us out as a region is too strong, but I don't want to overlook the fact that as a board they have to make a decision that they feel good about, and it's a big ask of them. Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever it looks like. I just want to acknowledge that from our perspective.
Thank you. And I'll acknowledge the slight chest pains I've been having here today, thinking about a unanimous vote to get a sales tax for the first time ever. Shane, I'm going to turn to you because you started some of this conversation to see what a recommendation might be.
Mike, how can we help you in terms of what you face tomorrow? Is it coming together as a TMC on options that we want to put in front of the board for consideration with maybe, some guidance and feedback on each of those options? Or do you want us to land on a option that we get behind and recommend? What do you need tomorrow? I mean, we can dice this up. Like I can say, hey, I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors an election in 2026 is not a path for success.
To the RTA board.
To the RTA board. Sorry, not board, the RTA board, that an election in 2026 is not a path for success. It's actually very risky, and if we fail, it basically puts the kibosh on any of the other things that we've been talking about today. I think, my personal opinion, for some time.
Is that helpful if we do it in pieces?
So you said your job was to make recommendations as professionals to the board. I think that's what Jen, you said, and Shane, your job is also to make my life difficult. So I understand. So check.
We're checking.
So let me go back to one thing that might help, and I apologize. I should have thought about this earlier. So yesterday, late, the RTA board meeting agenda was posted, and we had a late request. I shouldn't say that. We had a request for an item that is to look at the ballot measure and the date for that. And I'm going to go ahead and read it. I don't think we can put it up, so I apologize, but I'm going to read it just so that you know what's on the agenda, because I think it'll help in Shane if Shane wants to make a motion. So the item's the RTA next ballot measure date. That's the item number. Direct staff to return to RTA board by 7/31 options for the following 3 scenarios. The first one is RTA next goes to the voters on March, it says 3rd, but it's on March 10th, and includes voter approval of rescoped RTA 1 projects and elements. Second would be RTA next goes to the voters later in 2026 and includes voter approval of rescoped RTA 1 projects and elements. So basically it's March 10th or some other date, probably in 26. And then the third is RTA next goes to voters after 2026 following satisfactory delivery of the entire RTA 1 program. The last 2 scenarios will require discussion of gap funding plan, and all available options should also be presented to discuss by the RTA board on July 31. So in essence, they're sort of asking that, or they'll be discussing that. And so if in the context of that, you want to make a recommendation, I think that that could be very helpful.
Sounds like we are looking to recommend option 3.
Option 3, I think, is the one.
With 3A, what's the?
So just so we're clear, I'll read it again.
So it's
Go ahead. Oh, you wanted
RTA,
it.
I'm sorry, so that we would be recommending the option that says RTA next goes to the voters after 2026 following satisfactory delivery of the entire RTA 1 program recognizing that this will require a discussion of gap funding and all available options.
I'm suggesting in that it's not that the RTA shall go at some point after 2026, may go.
May go to the.
Because,
Okay.
because quite honestly, you know, we could get into the details of the countywide tax and find that it really fits the bill and in a lot of different ways. And we don't ever necessarily go back to an RTA next type of
Okay.
ballot question.
So I would entertain a motion that the TMC recommend to the RTA board that RTA next goes to the voters, that RTA may go to the voters after 2026 following satisfactory delivery of the entire RTA 1 program, and that the TMC be directed to continue discussions of a gap funding plan. I'd entertain that.
Madam Chair, one point of clarification. So I think part of the discussion that we've had up to this point is what it means to complete RTA 1. So I think that's an element that is either missing or needs additional clarification. So is it completion means we've spent all the money, or does completion mean that we've completed all the projects? If completion means we've completed all the projects, it's going to be a long time before we get to RTA next. And I don't think that that's a great option. I think completion needs to include some sort of element of the time. The time is over. The money is spent. We're moving forward, and we're including whatever jurisdictions have projects remaining, whatever jurisdiction projects they want to carry forward. That's in another plan as we move forward through a potentially different funding source.
So is the recommendation at this point potentially simply that we recommend that RTA next go to the voters after 2026, and that the RTA board ask us as the TMC to convene at our next 2 meetings in July prior to the next meeting of the board to define what is successful completion of the RTA?
Madam Chair.
Let me guess. Oh, wait, no, don't tell me. Mr. Tamur, do you have your hand up, sir?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm agreeing with my colleagues at the table. I think something around option 3 is where I would support TMC taking a position. I think what we're all struggling with is the way option 3 is phrased, not calling it at fault, just saying it says fully complete. And I think we could argue about substantially complete. There's probably, I think the core of it is just what you got to there, Jan, is deferring the election till after 2026 and using language like may come back and task the TMC with defining what all that looks like.
Thank you.
I think is what works. And I think that's compatible with where Shane.
And maybe thank you. And I think it's even the tweak to ask the TMC to come back and help define completion, but to also begin to look at some way that we deal with the regional transportation plans for the future. Shane.
Madam Chair, and colleagues, if a lot rides on what Mike learns from legal in terms of, what we can and can't say by way of, anyway, the question, do we have to complete? Are we obligated to complete all the projects? I'm sure that our councils and our board members on the board itself feel a political obligation to, deliver all the projects, but that's different from a legal obligation. If legal comes back and says, yeah, this region is legally mandated to deliver all those projects, basically the only option there is to dedicate 15 plus years of regional monies to deliver those projects. And I got to tell you, that's a difficult pill to swallow, I think, for all of us. So I hope that's not the outcome, but if that is the outcome, then it's not an RTA next. I mean, if I don't see how legal mandate to deliver means that we can go back and tax them more for it. Does that make sense? So it's not like we're going to rely on RTA Next to deliver what should have been delivered in RTA 1. If we have a legal mandate to deliver, then the only source we have is to allocate 15 plus years of regional monies to it. That's my simple mind working. That's Gilbert High School.
See,
Okay. So, you know, I wrestle with that a little bit. I also wrestle with trying to put back a recommendation based off of their language in these three options. That last, we're kind of coalescing around that third language, but I'm not so sure that I would be recommending the board go out for an election right now. Even after 2026, you know, we simply have to explore. I think we're obligated to do some more due diligence on other possibilities, i.e. the county option for a countywide sales tax.
Thank you, Mike, and then Paul.
So how about this? The conversation really isn't when the election is as much as we know when it's not, right? We know based on what I'm hearing here, you're recommending against a March 26 date.
A 2026 date.
2026 date.
That's
so
me personally.
No, I understand, but that's the conversation I'm hearing and I'm gleaning from that. So, all right. So my thought is the recommendation doesn't have to follow that exactly to your point, but I think the recommendation is that we as the RTA not consider a March 10, 2026 date and return on July 31st with strategies for completion of RTA 1. Let me change that. Delivery of RTA 1. And I think what that does is it gives us an opportunity to then, between now and then, define what delivery is and have those conversations, which basically means, you know, we'll be working closely with legal for next week when we get back together. We can talk through, okay, here's what we learned, here's some ideas, here's some strategies, and then formulate a recommendation, which will then go to the board for their 31st meeting. Because we've got two more, this group have two more bites at the apple right before the 31st. So that way you're able to, you know, put on record that you're thinking as a team that we don't go in March of 26. We don't know when, we're not even sure if, but what's more important is delivery of that RTA 1 program. And then we'll have a conversation about what that looks like going forward. That's my suggestion.
Madam Chair.
Sure.
Mike, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that gives us some time to further strategize. We're committing ourselves to weekly meetings. So, you know, I think that gives us time to do that. However, tomorrow the board is meeting and you're going to be giving them some level of recommendation from this group. Do any of us know if our board representatives are poised to actually jump out ahead of the TMC with a recommendation, a solution? And if so, do we need to talk about what that is? Because that could change everything. So
I think Supervisor Hines, who's our representative, I believe is the one who submitted these agenda items. So if that tells you where he is.
And I'll just add, I think what Mike just laid out is compatible with where the mayor would be thinking as well.
Okay. So
what do you need from us for tomorrow? Simply a recommendation that we not have an election in.
Yeah, that the recommendation that what sounds like to me is a recommendation from the group, and you can break them up if you'd like. Recommendation to not have an election or hold an election in March of 26 and return on July 31st with recommendations and strategies for delivery of RTA 1.
I'll also move that.
Thank you. And moved and seconded. Everybody clear on the motion? Tim, just kind of keep watching for that one.
Tim's just off mute, ready to say aye.
Any other discussion? Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Madam Chair, I think we move on to item 2 on the agenda now. No. Madam Chair, just so that you all know, what I will do is, work with the staff today, craft, this. I'll send out a note to the board and let them know what that recommendation is, so that they're ready, at least that if you have opportunity, you can chat with your folks, your representatives in time for the meeting tomorrow.
And I think, and I just, part of it, some other things that we'll be looking at, we discussed today about looking at update expenditures. I think it's important we identify the successes as part of this. What's the money that got moved from other elements? So we understand the whole kit and caboodle, bifurcate some of the pieces. Got it.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So Mike, if you happen to hear any guidance, direction, any insight on the legal aspect before tomorrow's meeting, would you please send that out to us so that we have a heads up on that? Thank you.
I'm sorry, apologies.
And I'd like to add, because I agree with where Shane was going on this, what defines what completion is. And in the statute, there's a time frame. It's a 20-year time frame. You shall deliver these projects in 20 years. That's when the taxation stops. Now, there is some over to spend that money. That goes to Shane's first point, is that the money collected defines what can be done. And I want to make sure that that is put into the equation here with regard to the definition.
Anything else for the good of the order?
I appreciate you when everybody took the curveball.
Yeah, it's good to know. My second meeting and we eliminated RTA next, so that's well done. Anything else for this body? We are adjourned. Do you chair? Van?
Folks, we do have a management committee meeting. If you want to take about 5 minutes and then, we'll come back. Tim, are you okay with that? Reconvening in about 5 minutes?
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mr. Ortega just signing back in. Are we ready to rock and roll?
Let me call him. Was better. Okay,
All right.
cool. Thank you. All right, Tim, you want to run it or you want me to do it from here? How would you like to deal with that?
I'd like to call it to order and then turn it over to you to run. And just so you know, I have a hard stop close to 10:50. I have a coffee with Mike. I mean, a team focus with Tim with my staff.
I'm glad you're still doing that. Good job. Well done. Tell him I said hi. Maybe
Uh,
I'll log on and ask you some tough questions. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's keep going. Go ahead.
right.
Thank you, Tim.
We'll start with downtown parking and I call the meeting here at 10:15 a.m. on July.
I'll educate everybody here how that's the running joke. Okay, first item, approval of meeting summary. Is there a opportunity? There's a motion by Terry, a second by Jan. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays? All right, motion carries unanimously. Item 3, it's the review and recommend approval of the FY 25-26 PAC Transportation Improvement Program Amendment 25.01. Adam, you're going to take the lead. So please, if you give us a brief overview.
Sure thing. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we're asking today for the Management Committee to recommend approval of the amendment in the 25 through 29 Transportation Improvement Program for programming of FTA formula apportion funds in fiscal 25 for tips pertaining to regional transit. We have those detailed in item A at the attachment. This is ordinarily a pretty straightforward process. We're in familiar territory with this, but one wrinkle that we introduced this time around, we're still waiting to seek our air quality conformity. We're in the lapse grace period currently, and we're waiting for the RMAP is the process by which we receive our new air quality conformity determination. I mention that because currently we are limited to administrative corrections to our TIP, both here and at the state level pertaining to PAG projects. And having that said, the TPC wanted to note and make their recommendation provisional upon the securing of the new air quality conformity. We're comfortable either with a straightforward recommendation, knowing that we wouldn't advance it prior to receiving that air quality conformity. But if the committee prefers to make it provisionally, we're okay in either direction. I'm available for more information or answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions of Adam? Hearing none, I would call for the question. There's a motion on the floor for
Second.
approval. Is there a second? There's a second. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item is the Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan update from Jeanette Doreen. Jeanette, you lead us on the conversation. Thank you. And by the way, I know you were present for the conversation we had previously about potential for when we're out and about talking about RMAP, maybe including RTA. So I don't know if you want to touch on that as well. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee, my name is Jeanette Duran, Transportation Planning Director, here to talk to you guys about the RMAP again, and hopefully for the last time before Regional Council approval. We're anticipating that happening on the 31st. And I did just want to provide a few quick updates. We did have a meeting last night at 6 o'clock. It was a virtual open house for members of the community to participate, provide comments and feedback on the draft document. We did have several people participate and submit questions. We'll be putting a summary of all the questions and comments that we've received to date together and include that in the Regional Council packet for the 31st. We've received just a couple comments from the general public. We opened that 30-day public comment period at the last TPC meeting, so that was mid-June, and that runs until Sunday. So next week we'll be putting together a log of all the comments and questions that we've received. We did hold an environmental stakeholders meeting and had some participation from Fish and Game and other environmental and cultural stakeholders. They did submit some written comments. Those have been addressed and incorporated into the document. The interagency consultation for air quality conformity was distributed to partnering agencies. They had a deadline to submit comments. Those have been submitted and addressed. And so we're all set on air quality conformity. Once the Regional Council approves that, we'll forward it all on to FHWA and hopefully get an approval really quickly. Dustin and our team have been in constant communication with them to make sure that we get our approval and our determination of conformity as quickly as possible. And once that happens, then the tip amendments that have been, in queue would then be in conformity and could move forward with programming that money. The link to the document was provided in your packet. It's been publicly available for about a month now. And today I'm asking for I'm recommending approval of the draft 2055 RMAP, and an action of this committee would essentially just move it on to the Regional Council for their review and discussion and potential approval on the 31st. And that's all I have today. If you have any questions, of course, I can answer them.
Thank you, Jeanette. Are there questions for Jeanette? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval or a recommendation of approval.
So moved. I'll second.
Motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Jeanette. Appreciate
you.
that. We'll move on to item 5, Regional Transportation Revenues Update. James Tao, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of Management Committee. If you'll turn to Table 1 of the Regional Transportation Revenues Report, through May, PAG has collected about $30.2 million in regional HERF, while the STBG apportionments for the fiscal year are projected at $21 million. In Table 3 and Figure 1, through May, more than $174 million in HERF and vehicle license tax was collected across the region. As I mentioned, PAG collected about $3 million, while the remaining amount was distributed to member jurisdictions. Regional HERF revenues show an almost 3% increase year over year and an 11% increase compared to the 5-year average. Table 4 shows HERF 12.6 in detail. Through May, we collected $30.2 million, which is more than 16% over the ADOT official forecast. Reporting of actuals was delayed in November and December of FY24, affecting the year-to-year comparison. Table 5 shows HERF 2.6 was with stronger than expected collections totaling over 6.7 million through May. And with Table 6 through March, PAG had collected over 108 million in an interest-bearing account. Most of these dollars are spoken for. In Table 7, we look at the city and town HERF distributions year-to-date. Table 8 shows the HERF 12.6 and 2.6 we have already seen. We also have Pima County HERF and Pima County Vehicle License Tax, the portion set aside for transportation use only. And Table 9 has the previous 5 years and lets you see how much HERF your city or town received, while Table 10 shows us gallons of gas sold in Pima County through various fiscal years. Keep in mind that the amounts shown are for the same year-to-date period during the previous 4 fiscal years. The region typically sees about 13% of statewide gasoline sales, and through May, we were just under 13% for the fiscal year. And in Table 11, over 115 million has been collected in TPT through May, trending closely to the adopted budget, while showing a small increase from the same period last year. Mr. Chair, thank you. That concludes my update.
Thank you. Are there any questions? This is an informational item, so there's no action on this. Is there any questions for James? James, thank you. You do a great job. Hearing no other business, we stand adjourned promptly at whatever time it is. So, there we go. Like
10:20.
10:23.
New record.
Thank you for being here. Thanks, Tim.
You bet.